I will be brief.
I can read.
We'll take it out of order then. All right, here we go.
Taken out of order, number 4, other items as needed at last night's select board meeting. One of the items that came under discussion was the consideration of soliciting members to the comprehensive plan committee. That needs to get underway. We voted to come up with a solicitation plan. And the town manager requested, he couldn't be here tonight, he had a medical appointment. That this committee look at creating that solicitation plan, and I would only offer that in doing so, we should probably ensure that folks know that it is for review and update and not a complete rewrite like it was done, what, 15 years ago.
Yep.
That would scare a lot of people off, I think, if it was a complete rewrite. So sometime we need to put that in our agenda to come up with the language we want to use for an advertisement, I guess. For solicitation of participation. We do have some members already, but very few, and we probably should get 10 to 12. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Is that gonna be a new committee?
Yes, it's the birth of the last one from 15 years ago dissolved.
Yeah.
Jerry Summonsby, I believe, has stayed pretty much on top of things and would probably be engaged again and has been engaged in the plan itself over time. So still probably be one, and there's a couple others that are have already come forward, filled out an application to be a member of the committee. But we'd like to get it done in 4 to 5 months and possibly have the rewrite done, that committee's work done prior to town meeting.
So it's only a few months.
If they have their review and update done, it's not gonna take tons of things, well, you might know better, but.
I mean, usually they're, I would say 12 months as a minimum.
Well, they're only gonna meet 5 days a week.
No, that's it. Yeah, well, let's put the notes down in the language of the ad. That's your commitment.
Okay.
My suggestion, I have a suggestion if you don't mind. One thing that we could do is and I really find comprehensive plans to be an important celebration of a community rather than, it's an opportunity for this town to celebrate what's good about this town and to think about this town in those terms, as opposed to here's all the things that are wrong and happening, and these are the things that we need to fix. So we want to frame the conversation that way. Maybe the best thing to do would be to have a meeting. We won't call it like the committee kickoff meeting, but let's have a comprehensive plan meeting where we invite the public. Maybe we can have a larger public discussion, sort of like building on those neighborhood conversations that we've already had. And then explain to people what the comprehensive plan is, what is expected for this particular comprehensive plan process. And don't let people leave the room without signing up. But I mean, to me, it's a lot of people are probably like, another committee or whatever, and comprehensive plans can be tedious, but a lot of the work that's required up front, we're just gonna go through and do before the committee even meets, so.
How big a committee do you think we should be?
10 to 12, if we can get that many, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how the board wants to handle that, but that would be one suggestion I would say, just to generate a little bit of more interest, might be, let's come and talk about the comp plan. Then ask people.
Well, from this group, we can write what we think would be a good recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and bring it to them, see what they think about it. And
Yep.
we'll be off and running.
Right, and it doesn't need to be a tedious process, but it is an important process, and there's a lot of things that are happening around the island that warrant, some good discussion for this community.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't shortchange it just because it's an update, but I would say there's, a handful of things that you can focus on. Maybe we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about natural resources.
Mhm.
We can spend more time talking about housing, for example.
Mhm.
Right.
Hmm.
Thank you.
When are you looking to start? Is that possible?
It's up to these guys.
Sooner the better.
We've already started some updates.
Whatever this committee recommends in terms of when that preliminary meeting to invite people in that should happen,
Yeah.
then we can put that in our advertisement, inviting people to.
Mhm.
To the meeting.
Yeah, would it be helpful for me to go back to my office and think about that a little bit and then suggest a meeting date where we just focus on comp plans?
That would be a good one. We can just have a meeting of us and invite the public.
Right,
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
does
Yeah,
that work?
yep, perfect.
Great. Comp plan it is.
I'm gonna grab a glass of water, I'll be back.
You want me to, Jerry, you want me to go to the next thing on the agenda? Okay. All right, so on the agenda tonight, I had a couple of different things to start to dive into. Number one is sort of a continuing discussion of LD 2003, which we touched upon last time. I might skip over the short-term rentals and just flip the conversation around a little bit and talk about the subdivision ordinance a little bit more, and then short-term rentals, if that's all right with everybody. Okay, so at the last meeting we had, we talked about just sort of like a 101 on LD 2003. And I think since then, Kim, it was between this meeting and that meeting that we had a nice slideshow with the folks from the state and other people around the island, just to talk about the three different parts of LD 2003. So for people in the audience who don't know what LD 2003 is, it's actually a really important new state law that we all have to adopt related to housing and affordable housing provisions. So the first part is really that affordable housing subdivision aspect. So what the rules say is if you're doing an affordable housing subdivision, which has to meet the criteria of affordable housing subdivision, you will get a density bonus of 2.5 times the standard density of an area. So affordable housing projects are 80% of the area median income. And I was gonna look it up before I came tonight to let everybody know what it was, but it slipped my mind, so I didn't. But what we're going to do.
The state median income.
Area, I think it's, maybe it is a state median income. Yeah, I thought it was the area median income, but it's,
I could be wrong.
I could be wrong too. So in any event, there's gonna be a number, and if you have projects that meet that criteria, which we'll outline, that has to be integrated into our new subdivision ordinance. And the questions that we need to discuss when I come to you with a draft, which will be at the next meeting for the affordable part, are do we want to also think about adding a provision in the ordinance that deals with density bonuses for projects that are higher than that 80%? So one of the things on NDI is that there's definitely a need for projects that are within that 80% area median income, but then there's a need for projects that are also within a certain range above that. So like up to, it's the random numbers, say 150% of the area median income. And we can throw some numbers at that just for discussion purposes. You may want to just consider, for a project at this scale, here's your density bonus. For a project of this scale, here's a slightly modified bonus or whatever, but just for discussion purposes, I thought that would be interesting. And the state already has some language in their guidelines that'll make, I think, simplify some of the confusing language in the current ordinance. And again, what we're trying to do is separate clustering from workforce housing provisions, and so that will all shake out in the subdivision ordinance, but that's going to be for the next meeting. That work for everyone? So think about questions. I'll try to get you some stuff ahead of time so we can really think about it. So the second part of the LD 2003 is that every lot has to allow between 2 and 4 units per lot, depending on the provisions, pointing on the status of the development of that existing lot. But don't be scared by that, because what that doesn't mean is that we have to change the density requirements of a lot. It just means that we have to allow, say we wanted to do a 4-unit development. If the density of our ordinance says you have to have, 10,000 square feet for each unit or lot, then the density, the dimensional standards are the same. It's just that you can't say on any one particular lot, you can't have up to that number of units. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so that, I think we already do that for the most part. So we probably don't need to change anything, but if you guys want to go to section 6B11, because everybody has their ordinance, you know? Should start bringing the ordinance to the meeting. That'd be helpful.
On my desk.
So just for references, 6B11 is where the town deals with lots, and section 3.5 is where the town deals with density or dimensional standards. So the dimensional standards don't need to change, but what I don't know is if we have to go in and deal with anything related to multifamily units on a lot, and I guess that was a question I was gonna have for you, Kim. If somebody came to the town and said, we wanna do a 4-unit apartment building. Does that mean, so set aside subdivision for a second, but is it clear enough in the ordinance that you have to meet the dimensional standards of each unit above like a duplex? So it's not a duplex, it's a multifamily unit. Where's that provision? Didn't we have that at one point?
Multi-family,
Yeah. I know it's an allowed use,
we had additional one in two-family dwelling
which we still do.
under 6011.
Yep,
Excuse me.
so if you
But if you
did,
have a duplex, and you apply for another duplex, you have to meet the dimensional requirements for a second duplex.
yeah,
Like if it's 1 acre, you need 2 to have 2 lots.
right. But if you had say I did a 4-unit structure,
Mhm.
wouldn't I have to do, I think the way I had always interpreted it was you have to do, if it's 1 acre minimum lot size, you'd have to have 4 acres for those 4 units. I think that's how it reads. So what I was trying to figure out, as I was going through this in the ordinance, if we just have to tweak that to make it clear that that's our dimensional standards are per unit, except for a duplex, which is counted as the same as a single family unit. So we may have to like clarify that just a little bit.
Yep.
That was the one provision.
Is a triplex the same as a duplex? No, one.
5 is 3,
So tri is 3, but a duplex is 1.
2.
What the town decided, a duplex includes 2 units, a triplex includes 3 units.
Yes,
A quad is
I got
4,
it.
right? So those are just different units. What the town decided was, for dimensional standards, a duplex is treated the same as a single family unit.
Okay.
So if you have 1 duplex, it counts, you have to only meet the dimensional standards for a single family.
For the second one, another duplex, you have to meet the dimensional requirements for another like dwelling unit.
Okay.
So for 2 duplexes, it would actually be 2 acres.
Yeah.
Right, so that's good. I mean, we have a lot, I guess my message for LD 2003 is it's really important for a lot of this affordability stuff. Some of that stuff this town already does. And what LD 2003 doesn't do is really address dimensional standards that would make it like you're not increasing density in the big picture.
So for deed purposes, if you had a 2-acre lot, and you wanted to add a second duplex to it, you'd have to create 2 separate lots. Is that?
No, you just have to do whatever subdivision, potentially subdivision thing you have to do.
I see.
Yep.
So that doesn't involve the accessory structure language and all that other,
So the accessory one that's part 3, that's a wholly separate
right?
thing we
Okay.
need to deal with.
Yeah, they call them accessory dwelling
Yep.
units
Which,
under the state.
yeah. So what I'm saying is I've gone through, we've got a little checklist that we've developed that we're sort of going through each section, trying to tweak the language. Primarily, I think we already allow most of this on a lot. We just need to be clear. I think what just brought up to me was, do we need to clarify what we mean by like a multifamily unit? Still requires the dimensional standards or not, depending on this. Maybe we could decide to change that. But that's where we're headed for that. Part 3 of LD 2003 deals with accessory dwelling units, and these are some questions I think we should start to talk about. One is, we do already allow accessory dwelling units under section 6B11. 6B11(3), in case anybody's curious. So there's no density requirement there. What LD 2003 says is, there's no density requirement for,
Accessory.
there's for an accessory dwelling unit. You don't have to meet dimensional standards for accessory dwelling unit, and you can't require additional parking requirements. So there's a parking thing tied to that, which we don't have parking standards really. So, which again, we should add to the list of things to talk about, because I think it's starting to get a little more important. And I think we might need to tweak a few things to help, make sure that we meet that. But one question I had is in the shoreland zone, it does say you have to apply for the standards of the shoreline zone. And I do think we might need to double check with DEP on this, but currently we don't allow accessory dwelling units in the shoreline zone. And now we probably do need to allow them in the shoreline zone. But we still need to meet shoreline zone
Does the state
requirements.
one allow it? I don't think.
I think the state would allow it if you met the dimensional standards. From the state, like if you have enough shore frontage and lot area.
Oh, that's what we have anyways.
Yeah, but we need to make, I think we might need to be clear that that is allowed.
That's fine.
Sure.
Short-term rentals
Yeah,
in 2003.
yep,
Doesn't strike me as short-term rentals quite well together with the fundamental purpose behind 2003.
yeah, I would say one of the things that LD 2003 doesn't do is really deal with any of that. It really doesn't, it only deals with affordability in the first part that I talked about. That's it. So that's actually a question I had about accessory dwelling units is, as a town, currently we don't require any affordability tied to this. Do we want to start to think about how we might want to encourage affordability in accessory dwelling units, or does it, do we already encourage that enough?
How many accessory dwelling units are used?
You only get one, I think.
No, how many of them that are around are used as year-round housing,
It's a good question.
as opposed to building and
Yep,
renting it on your property?
right, and that may be something that we want to tie to this.
Yeah.
Yep. Which we don't currently do. So that's a question. Discuss.
You're talking about like garage apartments
Yeah,
or
or
anything.
right now, let's just use the ordinance that we have, which is you can build a structure up to 75% of the size of your primary structure.
Mhm.
And there's no requirement that that be, of either tied to some affordability or at least a year-round structure.
Which gets into when we figure out how to deal with short-term rental units, any accessory dwelling unit on a property that was the short-term rental would have to be included in that when it happens.
Yep, depending on how we write it, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Just as a thought, I don't think we haven't created any language right now. Part of what we had talked about it, or you guys had talked about as a committee was, let's brainstorm ideas on things that we can do for this housing. To encourage more year-round housing. So that's a thought exercise that we should probably have. We could allow, something smaller, something larger, whatever. There's a few things we could, right now, we only allow them up to a certain size. The state says you can only restrict them to a certain minimum.
Mm. They're really two separate issues still.
Well, short-term rentals is an issue,
Yes,
and then allowing accessory dwelling units and how you should allow them is a separate discussion.
right.
Yep.
I don't know if they can be really tied together.
I think they would be tied together if you said these accessory dwelling units shall be used for year-round housing and not for some other purpose.
Mm.
The cost of building may not even, if that were the case, then you would not see a lot of accessory buildings, I wouldn't think.
I'm not sure we already. We have to answer that question.
Do we have a lot of accessory dwelling units? Any?
We have some,
I have one. I have one at my house, yeah, a garage apartment, but it's year-round housing for someone, yeah.
But did you always have it? Or did you put it in after we passed the ordinance? Or is that a question you can't answer?
I don't have any idea,
I think
yeah,
yours was there before we passed the ordinance.
probably, so we'll just stop talking about it then.
Can I say something here, guys? Can I say something?
Mhm.
Tracy
Sure, go ahead.
Aberman. This is Tracy Aberman from Northeast Harbor.
Yes, go ahead, Tracy.
Hi, yeah, I just put in an accessory dwelling unit in my backyard. I have almost 2 acres and just so you guys know, I mean, to say that it has to be used for affordable housing would be kind of difficult for people. It turns out that to put an accessory dwelling unit on your back property, as I discovered over the last 18 months, it's very expensive, required a separate septic system, electric, everything. It's basically another residence. And then after all was said and done, they couldn't get the water pipes deep enough for me to actually operate it year round as an for someone to live in year round. So I built it so that I could run my store and rent the farmhouse, so that I could live on my property while I rented my farmhouse because I'm working so much when the store is open. But if you passed wording that said, I had to use it for affordable housing, I couldn't even meet those standards if I wanted to. My original intention was to rent it to, through, September through June or October through June to a family, but I can't keep the plumbing going. I have to shut it down over the winter because of the granite ledge. So I think there's some unique characteristics of our area too that would make it cost prohibitive to meet those kind of standards. Just wanted to weigh in because I just did it. And I'm gonna have to shut it down in December.
What would qualify it as a year-round? I mean, any year-round residential unit has to be able to stay open for the
You're right.
year-round, and so would something like that be considered a year-round
Okay, now,
unit, or would it be like a,
3 seasons.
camp.
Camp, yeah.
or something?
It's good.
Seasonal housing.
Seasonal.
Yeah,
Seasonal, yeah.
seasonal. Cause there are a lot of places that have. Cottages that they can live in the summertime, but they can't use them in the winter. Peabody Drive used to not have water in the winter,
Right.
Mhm, yeah.
they probably still do, but
Mhm.
They have wells.
they have wells.
Mhm.
I thought an accessory dwelling could be rented as you wished.
Well,
Doesn't have to be year round.
No,
we're getting ready, well,
I think the question is tied back to the exercise we're going through. Currently, it's an ADU,
Whatever,
just meets these standards and there's no tie. So I guess I'm just posing the question, like the town offers this. For all property owners, should something to that effect be tied to year-round housing?
Are dwellings that are already, like someone like Tracy, are those gonna be grandfathered because like she could do, or is there none of that probably? You know what I mean?
It's good, yeah.
well, it wouldn't, it
I
can't
think
qualify
Tracy's
as
good.
year-round
Well, it
housing
can't qualify,
anyways, because you
yeah.
can't live there.
Or anybody that's already doing, or,
That's a really good example of things to consider when we're discussing.
Does LD 2023 require that
No,
everyone,
accessory dwellings all be year-round?
nope,
okay, not changing.
They don't address rental agreements.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think LD 2003 is a really interesting piece of legislation. People are really scared by it, but it really it doesn't change dimensional standards. It addresses affordability in the context of subdivisions that are affordable. And in places like Mount Desert, you already have some provisions that allow for multiple dwellings. You just need to tweak the language a little bit to be more in compliance with what the law is requiring. And do better at our affordable housing.
Is it all based on subdivision?
Is there any residential thing is gonna have to
Anywhere
apply?
you allow residential dwelling, you have
You have to
to
apply
allow,
this,
you have
yeah.
to apply, so that's literally every zone.
Yeah.
Except for maybe one, the R3. Which is the hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is being altered, because it's not conducive to every town, the city and the state of Maine. Right now, there's legislation, where it's being proposed that this only applies to over its population of 10,000.
Year-round
Yeah.
population of 10,000.
So right now, it's kind of still been up in the air, it's up and down, and we were told we had to have this adopted by July 1st, now it's been moved to October. And now there's this legislation about whether it even applies to populations under 10,000. So still kind of, balls are still juggling, and I went to a training in May. And two attorneys were up on the stage, you know, trying to explain to us this LB 2003, and they couldn't answer half the questions that were asked in the code enforcement. Because they didn't know, because this was like just pushed in the legislation and signed by the governor.
Sometimes that's what you gotta do to make change.
Doesn't make sense
So-
sometimes, but-
My philosophy on this is, you have the framework of a lot of things that LD 2003 requires, you just need to make it better. And by having the state tell you that you have to make it better, it avoids, not avoids, but it forces us to have this discussion, which is good, otherwise you might not. But I think that you already allow multiple dwelling units on a lot. LD 2003 doesn't change the dimensional requirements for that. You already allow accessory dwelling units. We just need to think about them in other areas, and I think I would pose the question. To what degree do we want to think about accessory dwelling units as a bonus and tie it to some other thing that we're trying to achieve? Whether we do it this year or some other year, that's just a question. Tracy makes a good comment, and this is like typical of Mount Desert. There's like so many different scenarios that we have to try to figure out to accommodate that makes like the thinking about it a little more difficult. So that's where we are, but next time we are gonna add, I'm gonna try to have some language for the affordability stuff in the subdivision ordinance, because we'll be diving into that a lot more. Any questions about LD 2003? From here? Good? All right. So I'm gonna
No,
skip to this- Yeah.
No, before you go on, I was having a hard time getting my unmuted. I just wonder if maybe rather than trying to license and regulate and always try and tell property owners what they can do or can't do with their own property that they've spent their entire lives supporting, if maybe you just incentivize something like that, where you say, you know, you've jumped through the hoops to put an accessory dwelling unit on your back property. And you know, the town will help you put the water pipes lower into your ground so that you could make it year round and make it you know, rentable to an off season or a year round person or something, rather than always penalizing or saying the town says you have to do this. Because this is private property, and it does feel like the town is starting to spread its fingers into people's private property. And there's really no, you know, you're constantly proposing licensing fees and inspections instead of saying like, hey, we're all part of this problem. How about the town incentivize people to help ease this problem? I just, you know, I attend a lot of these meetings, and I'm just always hearing this as sort of a, you are lucky enough to live here. Now you need to, whatever you worked hard for your whole life, you need to now open it up to people who want to live here, but can't afford to live here. And it just feels, it's starting to feel like, you know, this is, I've worked 20 years to hold on to this house. I don't really want a board telling me what I can do with my property. So anyway, sorry, it just took me a little while to find my unmute button.
That's all right. Thanks, Tracy. Yep, any response to that?
Well, that was the issue last year when we attempted to do this before. then there is a solution somewhere to be found, but we have to find it.
Right, not
And
incentives or something to add to the list.
Yeah, and there's still two differences between seasonal rentals even, and then a 9-month rental that somebody gets to stay till they get thrown out in the summer. Those are.
I think you meant to say until their lease ends.
Well, their lease ends in the summer when the prices go up.
But
So yes, or if they have a lease, a lot of them are month to month, I believe. But the fact that you have to leave in May, is not providing a year-round residential affordable house for someone to stay here. Unless they went to camping for 3 months.
I can say one thing about what Charlene said, that, you know, we do need to have some basic guidelines.
Hmm.
I have a neighbor that, you know, has junk all over the place.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's out of code and everything like that, and that's why we have some of these rules. To protect your property and to protect your property value from some a budding neighbor who abuses
Mhm.
what they have on their property. And so that's one of the big reasons why we have and do what we do.
Ellen, are you talking about basic guidelines for all lots or for specific?
Basically for any property.
Mhm.
You know, you can't just go nuts and do whatever you want. You know, like, you know, put a cell tower in your yard,
Without a permit.
put an airport in your yard.
When airports, did we just ban that last year?
Well, that's why we have rules, you know, we have a rule, you can't put an airport.
No airports, you're out.
That's right.
So we have guidelines.
There's a fine line of where you go with guidelines, whether it gets down to how tall your grass is.
I know that the town is very accommodating to people who may be on a little bit of the other side. They don't wanna,
Mhm.
you know, throw people out of their property or anything like that.
Yeah.
They wanna work with the owners and have things be as they should.
Yeah.
So there's always a tension, and there's always gonna be a tension between what individuals want to do or believe they can and should do with their property and the community as a whole. And town government is the way in which the community as a whole attempts to address common issues and common concerns, especially when it seems to the citizens of the town that things have gotten out of balance or out of whack, and the town is not being well served. So the town gets to decide, is it a priority to maintain a sufficiently healthy year-round community? If it is, then what are the factors that are preventing it from being a healthy and robust and self-sustaining year-round community? And there may be a number of factors, and short-term rentals may be one of them, and how people are just thinking that because I own my property, I can think of it as a piece in the vacuum, and what I do, if it affects other people, if it affects the neighborhood, with me putting somebody different in there every week all summer, that's my prerogative to do that, and other people are just gonna have to deal with it. And I'm not sure, as a community, that's the way for us to live as a community. But that's gonna be up to the town to decide, but we need to be thinking about broader policy issues and how individual wants and desires fit into that or don't. We can sit here all day long and talk about other imperatives that make my right to do anything I want with my property a problem. You could start with the school and the census in the school. We could go on and on for a long time, which I will not do. But I just think we need to remind ourselves what the mission of when we're acting as a town, in a town capacity. It's different than when we are acting as individuals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
All right. You guys want to talk about subdivisions?
Dying to.
You know I do. All right, so everybody has a copy of the subdivision draft. And I'll just give you an update on where we are with that.
Yeah, what you got? You
Huh?
pass it, pass that one?
Yeah, I'll pass this out in just a second.
Oh, I thought
This
you
is
were-
more homework. But, so I just want to give you a quick update.
I
So-
don't have, do you have more
This is-
copies?
You know what? I'm gonna send you an old copy, but what's happening is this
Is a new copy.
is not a new copy, but it will be, because I'm going through and revising section 7 in this ordinance, which is where we,
May 16 one,
yep,
you want me to go copy it?
no, because that's just a waste of paper.
Do I have a copy of that in my book?
We
Nope,
got it last week.
so,
This-
yeah, so anyway, section 7, just so you know, and we're hardly even gonna discuss this tonight, but again, something you're gonna get in the email in not too long is where we talk about review criteria and standards. And the way this draft is actually written up is it talks about the statutes, the statutory review criteria and standards, and then there's something called criteria, and then there's something called standards. And I think there's an easier way to do it that's a little more clear, and so I'm just gonna revise section 7 so that it has the statutory criteria. And then something called additional criteria, and that's where we get to discuss things like, you wanna add some standards about phosphorus, so if you're doing a subdivision near a lake, we do wanna make sure we have appropriate phosphorus standards. Relationships to community services, so that's where we normally go out and talk to the public works department and the town water and other places and get letters of capacity if you're doing a subdivision application.
And those will augment the state,
You still have to do the standards,
Yeah.
yes. they'll
so we
be-
can't diminish the state standards.
Yep,
We can augment them.
yes,
Mhm.
yep. And then that's where I'd probably put the road standards, so our subdivision ordinance currently has the town road standards, so we're gonna put those as additional standards. I think the way I've started drafting it up is that we have non-conforming roads and that whole provision, that you can go to the planning board and get a modification, that probably would fall into that category. Then there's other, what I'll call other criteria, and that's where we put like, I don't think we have any different standards for mobile home parks right now, but we might wanna think about that. Cluster provisions, which is the thing I'm gonna hand out in a second.
Aren't mobile home parks provided?
What's that?
Aren't mobile home parks prohibited?
No, I don't think you can prohibit mobile home parks. Pretty sure you cannot.
They're not. They're not allowed in.
Really?
Yeah, no,
We'll have to look at that because I'm pretty sure you can't do that.
well, it's been in there for quite a while.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I didn't-
Yeah, we're gonna look at that one then.
There was that one in Soamesville. that was-
That's why that's why it's prohibited everywhere else, is because of that.
Yeah, I think you have to have at least some, anyway. I'm gonna look at
Anyways,
There's one.
That's in the LUZO.
Oh, and not.
It is.
Is that in the bar?
it's
Harbor
been there
side?
for a long, long time.
It's on our side.
Okay.
So-
It was by, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Well, good to know. That is something we need to talk about. Cluster provisions, which I'll hand out, affordable and workforce housing provisions, so this is where we're gonna stick the LD 2003
Mhm.
language, and then my other question, which is, do you wanna do something also in between, so it doesn't have to be 2.5 times the density, but maybe it's something different to encourage projects that include houses that are also affordable above that level, but not, certain levels. So there's ranges of that we can talk about. And then, I think we might want to provide some condo development language, which I have some language for that makes it a little easier to understand that, what a condo development actually is in the context of a subdivision. So all of that being said, that's something that you're gonna be getting soon. And I'm revising section
Section
7
7.
because I think it's easier. But what I like about this ordinance, and when you get it, I'd like some feedback, some homework, especially members of the planning board. If you had, the way I've laid out section 6 is submission requirements, and I think put yourself in an applicant's shoes, put yourself in a review shoes. And that's actually a pretty easy way to understand that, yes, this is the checklist of all the
That's the
things you need to
checklist,
make
yeah.
sure you submit to be a complete application. And then here's all the standards you need to review. Here's the process that you have to go through. Hopefully it's much more clear. less room for interpretation. But the first one I want to talk about is, if you recall, in your existing subdivision ordinance, there's something called workforce and cluster provision
Yes.
housing. It's important to distinguish that they are two separate things. And what I'd like to do is try to clarify. So this is just language. Anybody want cluster? language?
Is that even a small? Just one.
So for homework, what I've done is drafted a clustering provision in the subdivision ordinance. And the things in yellow were basically like minimum shore frontage and some things that I need to check, so sometimes I'll put yellow things on just so we know to go back to them. But this one is similar in the context of what it requires is, if you want to do a cluster provision, you still have to provide open space. And so the aggregate of the amount of open space is the same as what you're reducing the lot size for. So it's the same principle as what's in the current.
Well, that would be a shared piece
Yep,
amongst the cluster.
right. And then there's some provisions in here that say this is what you need to provide to the board in terms of how you're gonna manage the open space and who's gonna pay for it and all that good stuff. But it tries to simplify that you could do a cluster provision, a cluster development that is a straight up subdivision. Or you could do a cluster subdivision and an
That is a
affordable
workforce.
subdivision or whatever, but there are certain instances where you don't, you shouldn't have to do a cluster subdivision for areas that can be affordable without having to do it. Like if you wanted to do a downtown project that has affordability elements, there's no point in having open space.
Right.
So this helps to clarify that.
Which would be the same if somebody built a 4-unit apartment building.
Right,
Okay,
Right, from here to here.
so it'd be the same, that would apply if somebody built a 4-unit apartment building. Open space necessarily be a concern.
Your rooftop garden.
yeah,
My new son-in-law does rooftop gardening
nice.
in Boston.
So it depends on where you want the open space, but. Yeah, so anyway, this is pretty standard cluster subdivision language. I'm not-
And this would strip them, put them into 2 parts, workforce and cluster.
They're gonna be separate. Yeah, so this would be like, 7 point whatever,
Whatever, yeah,
additional review criteria for cluster subdivision, 7 point whatever, additional review criteria for
For workforce.
affordable housing subdivisions. Section or whatever, if we did something that's slightly between 80 and 150, we'll say.
why do we use the term workforce? Still,
Well, from
Social.
the context of affordable housing,
right,
people have started moving away from that. Had started moving away from that term because of the images that it brought up.
yeah,
The reason why we're moving away from workforce housing is for the same reason. And now, I think the more term is more year-round housing, so we're.
well, that's what I was wondering, is there some reason we couldn't just make those changes to the terminology?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we can for the first part, the whatever LD 2003 says. but-
Yeah.
You just want regular houses for regular people?
Well, workforce housing implies bikers with pickup trucks and
Mhm.
dryers in their driveway and.
Some of those pickup trucks are pretty expensive. though.
Yeah.
I just been up in Vermont, so.
Yeah.
And when you come across New Hampshire, that's what you see all the way through New Hampshire. Once you get in the Trump side of the.
Pretty bad.
I know, but it's a, it's a
Yeah.
pejorative term.
But I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's the image, but the important part is there's a need for that in our community.
I agree.
And we're trying to create language, forget about the image that it brings up. It's here's the thing, what the ordinance provides is an incentive
Yeah.
for people to do that kind of development,
Right.
and it's needed.
Agreed.
right? We want you to do it, so we're giving you the incentive of, there's 2.5 times the density. So
Right.
now make it work, because we know you have to do more density in order to afford offset costs and blah, blah, blah. That's one tool.
Yeah.
I would say the same could be true for, yeah, I mean, it's all income based. That's the incentive, that's the whole point of a density bonus. It is a bonus to do what we want, to do what we want them to do.
An incentive.
It is an incentive, yes. I think it's one incentive that we could explore. Tracy brought up a couple other ones, so that's
Mhm.
interesting things to think about. So does that organizational structure make more sense? I
Yes.
think this part, I liked it originally. I think based on recent experience, it would get too confusing for the planning board. You probably want to just be a little more
You're right.
straightforward.
Makes it cleaner.
Trying to, yeah, but also like, yeah, cleaner and better. All right, so homework for you guys, without having to discuss this, is if you want to read over this in advance of getting all these other things. that would be- I'll send it out again. I don't think we need to print them today unless somebody says,
that's
let's do it, but I would rather like just reprint the updated draft and not have,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. Just to save paper. All right. Any other questions on subdivisions?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, we still have to tackle the idea of, we still have to discuss, next steps for short-term rentals. I don't think we've come up with a solution yet. I sent everybody, or Kim tailored everybody today, the past draft, which probably won't be the draft that we work from. This will be the draft we work from, but not necessarily any draft. Yeah. Do you wanna have the underlined version? I think it's the same.
This one is underlined.
Okay, yeah, the one that's underlined. So I think I do want to get back to, I think short-term rentals starts to bring up a policy question, and I believe that I mentioned this at the very beginning of this whole discussion, which is the town needs to decide how we want to proceed, and that balance is what we're going for, right? We need to decide if short-term rentals, or you all need to decide if short-term rentals, when have they become more, when are they an efficient use of space that's underutilized, and when are they now just catering to tourism use, and their use is not. So that's one policy question to start to think about. A couple other things, I've been screwing around on this a little bit. I think tonight's more of a brainstorming discussion than anything, so no decisions, no stake in the matter here, we're just having discussions. All voices are welcome. That, another way to look at it is, do we just start to distinguish between a short-term rental, which might be something where it's an actual structure that somebody lives in most of the time, but then rents out for a shorter period of time, versus a vacation rental, which is a place that somebody buys to turn around and rent it all the time.
Yes.
So there's two ways to look at that. And if you want to require, short-term rentals, you could start to think about, residents have an occupancy requirement, like you specify amount of time, is it, you can use these short-term rentals for X period of months. And then you have to be in that structure, and there's a bunch of different ways to start to look at this. Strategy. I also think, for context purposes, I'm gonna go back and update the data that we have, that we are able to get on short-term rentals, just so we are starting with at least some number. I know, other people have done some of that, research too, so I'm sure Lincoln's done a bunch of research on that too, and once we get all that information, at least we'll have a starting point that we can get to, so.
Why did this get shelved after we had worked on it?
Why did it get shelved?
Well, I mean, I think there's a misconception out in the community that because it was voted down, that was the end of the story.
But it wasn't
And-
voted.
I don't think it was.
Well, and we didn't move forward. What was the reason? Because of the controversy? Are we gonna try and solve some of that? I guess that's because we did work on it. but-
My reflection of the situation was, and other people who were in decision-making
Mhm.
roles can feel free to jump in, is that we did spend a lot of time on it.
Mhm.
We had a lot of comments about it, as we were working toward, closer to the town meeting.
Mhm.
And that the decision was, you know what, maybe we want to continue this discussion without putting it to a vote.
Mhm.
And try to find a better solution that starts to integrate a lot more of the things that we've talked about. So I don't think it was a dead in the water question as much as it was.
I
Withdrawn.
think that needs to be put out for public to hear. Yes, because
That's,
I've got, yeah,
that's me.
I agree. Yes.
Everybody else.
It wasn't ready for
Right.
voters, because
Right.
we didn't even know who's enforcing it yet.
Right,
We had no idea what the license fee is gonna be.
right.
We didn't, I mean, we still had to work on this, there was still a lot of questions as far
Yes.
as this and what homestay and all this means, I mean, it wasn't ready.
Right.
And you've got standards in here, who's gonna enforce that?
Right, so there's a
know,
question,
there's
is
a
it
lot-
going to be you?
Yeah,
I mean,
it
so
wasn't-
there's that,
that's, yeah.
or do
But
we
we
have
have
to
to
hire an
clarify all that.
employee, or, yeah, well, see, that's what I'm trying, I think there's a misconception out in the public that it was gone, it's gone away, and now we've brought it all back to life, and I think we need to make it clear that that's not what happened. In my own opinion, as I say it for now, the public record, that it was not just put to bed, that it was just temporarily shelved,
Yep,
just because of the way it was, not
Wasn't
dropped,
ready.
but it wasn't ready, right?
I believe the minutes of the select board
Mhm.
also reflect that it was set back for more work, that it was not complete,
Mhm.
that there were issues that were going to raise more questions than answers
Yep.
at town meeting.
Mhm.
Let's clarify what those questions are now.
Mhm.
Let's have the answers when we do finally go to town meeting. And that's why it was sent back to this group committee to continue working on.
Okay, good. I just wanted everyone that maybe listening to, yeah.
so. I want to continue, doing what we're directed to do. And it could be this version of this ordinances or some other combination of things. And again, I've put this into the context of, there's a lot of, housing related conversations that we're gonna be having as a group, and this is only one of those things. So
Mhm.
hopefully it doesn't dominate the conversation, but is only one part of the conversation.
Well, since we're brainstorming,
Yeah.
I have a suggestion under purpose,
Yes,
that in order to assist the public in understanding what this ordinance is proposed to do, we need to be very clear as to the nature of the problem that has been created by short-term rentals and how a license and a fee is going to ameliorate that problem. We have yet to address what is the problem that is bringing this ordinance to the surface. Because we don't want to just start creating ordinances for the sake of creating ordinances because somebody thinks it's a good idea.
Mhm.
So I think that needs to be clearly spelled out as to how this came to light, what is it supposed to fix? And then people might better understand as we go forward. I do have a couple other suggestions, if you want me to just keep going.
keep going.
Yeah.
And then everyone else can chip in, in section A of the requirements of the model that we've decided needed work. The timing of the renewal of a license. I think we talked about that a bit, but it never got into the language as to a timing issue. We knew it was going to be a management issue if all the licenses come in at once or requests every January 1st, then it's a nightmare for somebody.
Mhm.
And we talked about, it should be perhaps from the date of issuance to the date of issuance, rather than having them all expire on December 31st. The problem it raises in having them all expire on December 31st, is that most people that do rentals either have their information on the internet on their own website, or through Airbnb, or through VRBO, or whatever. If their license expires December 31st, and they're required to have a new license by January 1st, that gives them no time on the internet to adjust their webpage or whatever, because this ordinance, as it's written, says you're in violation if you advertise and you don't have that license in hand. So if we can build in a provision that says you can apply for your next license a month prior to or some period of time prior to the expiration of your current license. Then that wouldn't interfere with a person's ongoing ability to stay up to date with Airbnb, VRBO, their own particular website or whatever, because we have our own website. And to shut it down and start it up again is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is you have people that are here in August that before they leave, want to sign up for next August.
Right,
And if you lose your license on January 1st, but you've already got the lease and you've already taken the deposit,
right.
then you're in trouble.
I'm just saying that that's one of the issues that jumped out at me is causing a real potential
But
problem.
that would apply to any time your license expired.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Because it doesn't matter when your license expires if you, unless it's
Right.
the next day, if somebody rents a
Right,
house for next year. If your license expires any time within that year,
Yes.
you're in the same boat.
correct.
pretty much, yeah.
I mean, it's not, and it's. Kind of everybody else, I have to renew my driver's license every 5 years,
Mhm.
my car and
Mhm.
everything else. And that's my responsibility.
Yes,
So, I mean, just in the spirit of what we're doing tonight, I think any suggestion, is this something that we should write down, whether or not it's, you know, like, how do we?
Just things that I think we should be aware of as we go forward.
Yeah.
And the last one I had was in section D.
I don't have numbers, I don't have that, I only have numbers. Oh, under
Yeah,
requirements.
says A.
Penalties?
Oh, D, no, it's still under the requirements.
Oh,
This is page 3 of 5.
There you go.
purpose
And-
outside.
D short.
Oh, sure.
This is just a grammatical correction. At the end of the next to the last line. If the license is not renewed by the expiration date, comma, the license expires. Otherwise, it simply says
Says, you know.
renewed by the expiration date, the license expires. So that's all. I figured that would be enough for us to chew on for a while, for me anyway.
Do we have any idea how many homes, say in the last, I don't know, 5 years that have been bought and then just automatically turned into rentals?
I think
That no one lives in them, they just bought a house on Main Street and they're just renting it for seasonal or no,
I don't know,
no,
I don't think we have a count, you
No.
could drive down Somersville to Main Street and count them. Yep.
yeah,
Pretty easily,
yeah,
And they've been bought only for rentals, the owners,
yes,
the owners are gone,
Never
yeah,
there.
well, yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
yeah, that's,
yeah. What's your name? Alex Mafuji's grandmother's house, weekly rentals.
Mhm.
The guy next to the library is weekly rentals,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and that was bought immediately and turned into weekly rentals.
yeah, that's what I'm wondering, how many, cause like we're talking about, what is the problem is,
That is,
yeah, like there are enough homes being bought. No, I'm not talking season, like, and then they move back into them, I'm talking about just bought, just to be rented, they never live in them.
I think
or-
there's quite a few,
Few,
but not probably as many as Southwest Harbor. Which has more now.
Yeah,
oh, do they? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, well, that's what I'm curious, I
But-
just, yeah,
but of those homes that have been bought that are currently a rental home. We don't know if those homeowners are planning in 3 years or 5 years to retire to that home.
well, I know a couple of them that are.
Okay,
Mhm.
so, but anecdotally, you know that. But that's what I meant.
No, not anecdotally, I just know where they really live,
Okay,
and they have a nice year-round home on the island.
oh, okay,
They're not planning on retiring into that one.
Okay. cause that's what those are the people I kind of worry about, are the people that have inherited the family home. They've got to rent it for the next 5 years because they're still making their job and doing their thing in their other life. So they are a weekly rental for a short time.
That's valid.
Yeah.
And then they're
Rent it
gonna be
year
here.
round instead of by the week. If that's what they're doing, if they can't live there yet.
Well, we don't know that they don't have 6 kids that they gotta put through college. So what I'm saying is, you know,
And then what do we do about all the homes that have been rented for 50 years? especially in Northeast, I mean, this is, I mean, they were kind of popular before Airbnb and Vermont.
But those
they
tend to be
grant-
longer term.
Yes, well, that's what I was gonna say.
But that's
I
why
think
we
we
have a
talked about a
28-day
time
thing in
limit,
there.
right, that's, so are they sort of not exempt, but if you can run it 30 days, you're off the hook, or
Yes,
you are off the hook?
28 days.
Okay,
I just see that, homes are turning into hotels.
mhm,
And a home is not zoned, a residential home cannot be a hotel.
mhm,
And if a weekly rental, if you can rent it by the day
mhm.
or by the weekend or something like that, it's a hotel and it's not zoned for a hotel.
Well, what do we have right now?
I wish I had
Yeah,
10 or 20 of
Well,
myself,
yeah,
I
yeah.
do.
so what is
Only
the
if you had a
limit,
cleaning
what
day,
is our
really.
minimum day? Do we have a minimum day right now, or do you have to rent 3, or does?
I didn't
nothing?
see any
It's
minimum
under,
day in there, and I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna
put
say,
in
do we
there,
have a
'cause-
minimum?
Anything less than 28 days is considered a short-term rental
Right.
according to this.
according to this,
So you can now rent your house by the day.
Right now,
yes.
okay,
Yeah, there's
that's what
nothing
I was just
preventing it.
curious, okay,
I
Right.
believe
Nothing right now
that's the
preventing it.
current,
Yes.
I
know.
think
Yeah,
that's a big one.
under
right there.
28 days is what we put in.
I mean, without this,
Yeah.
28
just
nights.
wanted to do it,
Yeah.
there's no minimum.
No, that's what I was saying, minimum, and did Bar Harbor just, are they now a week or something?
Yes,
So,
I
okay,
don't know about that.
or, okay,
Technically, Tremont is a week.
And then there's some
Okay.
towns that have 3 days, because
3 days.
if somebody comes in for a wedding,
okay, well,
they're
you
not
see
gonna
that, I
stay a
didn't
week,
know,
they're gonna stay
Okay.
3 days.
okay, I thought we already had like a weekly,
28
but we
nights.
do not, ours is 28
In
nights.
this ordinance, the
Oh,
short-term
okay.
rental is defined as something that's rented less than 28 consecutive nights.
Right, yeah,
But there's
okay,
no, the original draft did have the
like 2
question,
nights, 3 nights,
do you
5
wanna
nights
have a minimum?
of a week. I
Yes.
think that's a big discussion right there.
If we do get into
That's
any
not- yeah.
restrictions, I do think we have to have a whole separate category
Mhm.
for somebody who is a year-round resident, has a homestead exemption on that
Mhm.
property, and they may rent that
Yeah.
out, seasonally,
Mhm.
while they live in a campground.
Yeah.
And
I-
so
I-
if you're a primary resident of the town, which I think is
Mhm,
181 or 182 days,
mhm,
or you have a homestead exemption on
mhm.
that property, that puts you in a whole different category than
Oh,
somebody who goes and buys 5 homes
Yes.
and
Yeah.
Right,
turns it into
Uh-huh.
a business.
so
Yeah.
that's the concept of,
Yes.
there's a short-term rental and then there's a vacation rental, like 2 separate things.
Right now there
That
is, or,
No,
That's what he's
like
talking
What I
about,
said
okay.
at the beginning,
okay.
that kind of concept, yeah, that's what you're getting. at.
Yes,
Do you, I'm talking, because you're a real estate, do we have many people that rent less than a week? Do you know, are there many people that,
No,
most are a week or more?
yes,
So that's not a huge, I mean,
Well,
to
it's
change,
not,
But-
isn't
but
it?
I-
that's
but I
not
would-
true.
No,
but wait,
oh,
but.
Stephanie,
but,
Stephanie, this is
Yeah.
Tracy Aberman again, sorry. I rent for less than a week and it's mostly families that are just coming and they just need more space
Mhm.
than a hotel room can afford. They're
Mhm.
not partiers, they're not, I'm not renting to groups of 20 people. It's
Mhm.
usually a family. And the other thing is it's usually a family with a dog. They just want to be able to bring their pet for a long weekend in Maine. But I also just want to point out, as you guys talk about this, you're getting into such personal details of people's lives. Like Katrina is pointing out, maybe this is a family that needs to put 6 kids through college and they're going to rent the house until they can use it as a retirement place or. And this is where I get like sick to my stomach that you as a board of 7 people are sitting there mulling over everyone's personal life. It's really just none of your business. I mean, why isn't this ordinance something as simple as if you own more than 2 properties and you rent them, you're running a business and you need to be
Because
licensed
that's not
and an
working is
ordinance.
the problem. That's why we are having to address this every year. I guess that's why I'm trying to figure out somewhere meeting in the middle. Like right now we have 28 days. That is apparently not working. Can we meet somewhere in the middle?
But
Can it
why
be-
are you saying it's not working?
Because
why
that's
is it not
we're back
working?
here again, I'm not saying I like it or don't like it, but obviously there's enough people in the community that aren't happy. And so that's why I'm trying to figure out somewhere, obviously a 3-day rental or whatnot, it's not. I think we're just, at this point, we can argue all day about if it's personal or not, but we've got to start somewhere meeting in the middle, I guess that's.
Yeah, but you're
my-
starting with you're starting with, instead of starting with something simple and refining it as the situation requires, you're trying to start with a 40-point bulletin of, here's the things you have to meet, here's the things you have to post on your door, here's the day it expires, here's, I'm just telling you, I'm just
Yeah.
telling you, like, you're getting it from a person who rents for sometimes a month, sometimes a week, and sometimes 3 days. And there's all different people who want to come to this island. And I would like to put a new roof on my house. So I would like to rent my house so I can afford to do
I
that.
totally understand, not on the island, but I have a rental, so I do understand completely where you're coming from. And I don't like really having to discuss this anymore than somebody else. I understand the personal part of it. But I guess what I'm now seeing is, and that's why I asked at the beginning, I thought this was shelved, and that's what I have heard from the public, but it's not. So here we are talking about it again, and I just have a feeling it's going to be brought back up until there's some meeting of the minds,
And-
whether we like it or not. I mean,
And what we're trying to do here is to add in all those things to make
yes,
an ordinance that will work. This is the one that
Right.
didn't work.
it didn't work, so we
So
are back
now
at
we're-
the table.
So now we're trying to
Yes.
rework it, so.
Yeah,
So your
Well-
question to
Yeah.
me was,
yes,
how many of the leases that I write
yes,
are for a week or less?
yes.
Zero.
Okay, see, so,
But
okay,
that's-
but that's only you,
But
I
wait,
know, yes.
But wait, that's part of my company policy.
Yes,
And that's part of the
Okay.
homeowners that I work with.
okay.
Now, I know that I
Mhm.
write leases
Mhm.
for a week,
Yeah,
but they stay for less than a week.
okay, well,
That's the customer's.
yeah, well, that's right,
Right.
that's a different,
That's a different.
different
And there's,
ball of
there are
wax,
a lot of
yeah.
people, my
And
kids,
that's their issue, that's
That's
their
their,
problem,
pro-
I guess,
that's
yeah,
their.
when
that's
my
their pro-
kids come
Yeah.
home at Christmas time, we
Yeah.
can't fit everybody in the house anymore.
right,
So they rent
Yeah.
for 3 or 4 days.
yeah. And are you, okay, so you're coming from a different and I know you are very pro, I assume, with the rental or what, so how do you feel if it would go to a week? And your
Well,
kids
they're
only
not
needed
coming for
3
a week.
days, yeah, no, I know, but if
So
it
they would
went
have to pay for
so
days
they
that they
would have
wouldn't
to
use.
pay for the date, that's what I'm trying
Then
to
I think,
justify,
then I
yeah,
think you're punishing them for something that is
Okay.
unavoidable.
okay,
I just went to Vermont to
Yeah.
a wedding and I
Yeah.
was there for 4 days.
right. So
Um,
how, okay, so how do
And
you?
I didn't have
yeah.
to pay for a week.
Right, so it's sort of that balance that we're trying to figure out, how do we meet a little, in the
And I
middle?
think most of the, I am just guessing that
Yeah.
most of the pricing of rentals,
Mhm.
um. Is, they're still making money if you rent it for 3 days.
Yeah, right, yeah, well, I'm sure, yeah,
That would be my guess.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think there's a need for some 3
Mhm.
days,
yeah.
if somebody flies in here
Mhm,
and they're going to
mhm.
A wedding.
A
a
wedding,
wedding, which is
right.
perfect, or a funeral.
Yeah,
we
or a
want to be
long
more of it.
holiday,
Um,
yeah,
they're only gonna be here 3 or 4 days.
Right.
And that's fine.
but the thing is, then we're back here again is the only, so I don't know.
Well, we're not
what-
back here yet, because we
Well,
haven't got.
Well,
we haven't
no,
written
but
it in
yeah,
yet.
no, but that's what I'm saying, we're discussing it again, so how do we meet?
Let's
Like
not
a-
worry about how
yeah.
we meet there yet. I
Okay,
appreciate where you're
yes,
heading.
yeah,
I think Tracy's made some good points. I
Yeah.
think we're listening to people in the audience, so we'll look
Mhm.
in and then,
mhm,
I just, for those who don't know me, I'm Dan McKay and I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee in town.
Mhm.
And I just want, I don't really want to get into the details, you're in the weeds much more than I. Except the comment that I think a little creativity, we can protect the interests of people who are truly local residents who are trying to supplement their income.
yes.
That's a different situation
Mhm.
than if I rent out my house in the summer, move to my summer camp off island,
Mhm.
and then move back. That's a different situation than if I buy the next 4 properties down the street
Right.
and just rent them by the week all year
Yes,
round.
yeah.
which is what I
I
wanted to
just
talk.
make that
Right.
observation.
Yeah.
But what I really just wanted to say is our committee, which is concerned with the economic vitality of the town, considers this to be a problem.
Mhm.
It's an economic problem,
Mhm.
potentially for the town, for the business owners on Main Street and everyone else. If this town doesn't have a viable year-round community,
Mhm.
every community in the country from New York City on down
Yeah.
is dealing with this problem. And many of them are adopting ordinances, and I would just urge that this community try to get ahead of the curve rather than being behind the 8 ball by wait too long because it's coming, and I appreciate the viewpoint of those who are concerned about the protection of the value and uses of their property. Regulation, that's what regulation and government is all about. It's all for the people's liberties in one way or another. As a community, I think we have to be willing to accept some regulation of our property rights in order to have a viable community that we all live in. That's all I'm saying.
Can I ask you what, is it economic development, yes?
Yeah.
So is that committee supportive of the project that's gonna happen on Neighborhood Road that would provide year-round housing to year-round people?
Yes. And we've submitted a letter to the planning board.
Excellent, thank you.
So my question, so back to Tracy, so if Tracy is not necessarily even, because she's going to be, I'm just using her as a, she has a home and she's moving into another one, so would she be exempt from, say, the 3-day, or whatever, or no?
I'm just gonna rephrase your question. I think Tracy made a really interesting point, which I've written down. What our exercise today is to try to recap a lot of these perspectives. Tracy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I heard was, let's try to make this simpler. And is there a way to categorize some rentals as what we were talking about earlier, like a short-term rental? It's kind of like what you're doing, Tracy. Or other rentals, which are more like businesses. That's the one thing to consider. I'm not saying. That's kind of like one of the highlights I took away from your comments, Tracy.
Yeah, I really do believe that the majority of people who rent in our town are renting to keep their properties afloat. You know, for instance, I got to put a new roof on my house. I work 1 million hours a day running the store. So I built the little accessory dwelling unit on the back of my property. So I would have a place to stay in the summer so that I can rent to the people who will, you know, pay to rent my house so I can put a new roof on. That's actually good for the community. My house does not look like a crappy, shingles flying off the top of it. I can afford to do that project and I can afford to live my life. I mean, I don't think everybody in Mount Desert is trying to become a millionaire off of it. And even if they are, so what? They're allowed to use the tools that they have at their hand. They're paying their whole lives for these properties. They should be able to use their properties to make their lives better. I really do believe that.
Yeah, can I just to clarify though, what I hear you saying is there's a difference between somebody who's like yourself, who owns the property and is doing some type of rental on it, over somebody who's just buying investment properties and renting them out.
Owns and
Oh,
lives.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Tracy
One's a
lives that.
business and one's
Right.
a local person trying to, keep their property afloat.
Right.
And I think we heard that quite a few good comments about that, Tracy, so thanks for bringing it up again.
Yeah, and I actually have to sign off, guys, but thank you so much. I'll be at every meeting, but this one I do have to leave a little early.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks.
Can I add
So-
one thing? It's Ines Hancock here.
Sure.
Can I just say
Then we
one
got
thing?
a comment in the audience, so go ahead, Ines, and then we'll.
Okay, thank you so much. I think just building on what you guys are trying to clarify, I think, understanding the difference between someone who wants to run a business doing this is different than a homeowner. So, that might need to rent it out in order to pay the taxes or do repairs or for whatever reason, make money for kids' college tuition, whatever. That's what I'm doing. I haven't thus far had to rent my house, but I would think that making the delineation between someone who's there year round, being able to do it without consequence, and charging someone who can't be counted as a year round resident would then be penalized by some sort of fee or different standard. I'm not sure that's the fairest way to delineate who gets to rent their house and who has to pay a fee or has to pay a consequence of some way. Because even though I can't be a year-round resident there now, I'm a property owner and a taxpayer, and we're doing everything we can just to pay those taxes that get paid into the town. But I'm not considered a year-round resident because I have to make my living here in New York. So I think, just saying, well, the year-rounders get a free pass to rent, but those that aren't year-rounders, have to suffer some kind of consequence. I'm not sure that's the fairest way to delineate. I think who's doing it as a business versus who's doing it, for their one home that they own should maybe be a better standard or might be more fair.
Thanks, Ines.
I haven't heard this discussed, or maybe Alan mentioned it today. At the same time, there are legitimate concerns about the increase in number of short-term rentals and the undue impacts they can have on the quality of life and quiet enjoyment of properties within the vicinity of short-term rentals. I too have been in this community a long time, and I have a home, and it is incompatible with the quiet enjoyment of my property to end up having properties around. I already have plenty of seasonal property owners around me who are not engaged in short-term rentals. But it is not, having somebody move into the house next door with their dog for 3 days and then move back out does have an impact on the quality of my life, and I'm similarly situated to lots of other people in this town. That's why there are hotels and motels. If you need to go someplace for 3 or 4 days, go to a hotel or motel. That's really the kind of business that is designed to handle that sort of thing, not to have somebody think they have the right to just be plunked down in the middle of somebody's residential community and have a constantly shifting cast of characters in the property next door for an increasingly long period in the year. Those are very different situations, and I don't hear anybody addressing that in this discussion, and we're just drilling down into the minutia. And I get the need for people to be able to, I know people who have to rent and move into campgrounds and, rent it out. And that's people who've lived here all their lives and grew up here. And that's part of our problem that we're trying to deal with in lots of different ways. But that's quite different from just thinking that it's my property and I can turn it into a business of, whether it's a 1-house business or a 20-house business if I want to, and any impact on my neighbors, just too bad. That's my property and not your property. I do think that we need to address that in this ordinance. I don't see anything in this ordinance that does that, because you're not grappling with areas of the zoning areas of the town. You're not grappling with the density of rentals. I'm in Somersville. House after house after house after house in that town in my time there, and the recent period of my time there, has been turned into a rental. Seasonal rental. House after house after house after house. And sure, you may have somebody who buys the house, never intending to live there, and they come for a couple weeks, but then they're Airbnb and they're renting it out for the rest of the time. I mean, that continues to have a negative impact on the life of a year-round community. You can't avoid that, and we have to figure out a balance. I have to tolerate some seasonal rentals. And the seasonal rentals need to tolerate some limits on their scope and the density and the impact on their community.
I guess that's what I was saying, a balance, like obviously. The 28 is too many days, but 3 days may be too small, I mean, yeah.
So just to be clear, the definition, what qualifies one as a short-term rental is you rent it anything from 1 to up to 28 days. Anything over that is a long-term rental, like I can rent my house up for a month. So that's the only.
Except for February.
Except for February, yeah. That's true.
Sorry.
This ordinance has
Good one, Jerry.
the one that we looked at last year and decided not to put on the warrant. It does not do anything to prohibit short-term rentals. It's merely a vehicle for registration of
Measurement.
short-term rentals and some oversight over the safety. I think that was yours.
That was my concern, safety.
Yeah, safety issues and having them available. And it seems to me that when the selectmen did decide not to put it on the warrant, it's because Kim strenuously, what's the word?
Objected.
Right.
There was just not, there were a lot of unanswered questions about how it was gonna be administered and how it was gonna work. And so I think that those are some of the questions that this committee or some committee needs to figure out.
how does it work?
Right, well,
You know?
can Kim do it? I think that's a huge,
Well, I
no,
don't think it is, Kim.
right,
No.
well, no, that's what I'm
No,
saying,
I
is it
don't think-
hiring of somebody else?
I
Or
don't- This is a
Yeah.
huge job.
If-
this is a huge job, yeah. Yeah,
I'm one person in my department.
I know.
right, but that's what,
It's
yeah,
not for, it's
Right.
not for kids.
If
Yeah.
we found that the numbers of short-term rentals were so high
Mhm.
that it needed this kind of regulation, then the town
Mhm.
should hire somebody to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem. If it's all,
Mhm.
if it's all weekly rentals, somebody's gonna have to manage it.
Yeah.
Every town probably has somebody that pays attention to it, can't be you.
right,
Right.
yeah,
But
No, I
it
agree,
would
yeah.
offset by actually figuring out what's going on with these things
Mhm.
and.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
then having some regulation and somebody to enforce. it.
So say this, oops, sorry, oh, go.
Also, last year, I don't know if all of you saw it, but, Noel did some work on finding, outfits that you can hire.
Yep.
Apart from individuals that,
Mhm.
that oversee this kind of thing,
Yes,
Mhm.
yep, that is all
There are a number of
available.
companies that you can hire.
Yeah,
Airbnb.
again, I mean,
Yeah.
going back to the principal policy decision that we were asked.
Person, they don't have any place to live.
That's true.
Last year, the principal thing that we were asked to do was write a short-term rental licensing ordinance that is essentially a registration ordinance.
Yes.
So the license is important because it gives the town the ability to make changes to the license if it finds from the data that there is a problem.
Mhm.
But this is almost as simple as you can get. I do think that got lost in the conversation a little bit.
And
but it's
half
a
of the
very simple
conflict that
process.
came up
But
was that it was,
There's standards in there.
that,
It's
that
not
they're
just
digging in
licensing.
too deep and forcing them to expose themselves. And that was half of the problem with the whole issue of this
Sure.
particular thing.
And I think that's in and of itself, the policy choice the town would need to
Yes.
make if you came back with that. Is this too much or whatever? But
How long after it's voted in, like say May, whatever, it's voted in or not, say if it's voted in, how? Do we have 2 months to find somebody?
it's
Or
immediate.
It's immediate.
It was
needs to be
immediate.
Okay, well, that is, I think, another, yeah,
That was the problem last
Yeah.
year was
so how do we
Put in place.
quickly,
Yeah.
somebody needs to, it needs to be
you need
a month, a week,
some lead up time.
something, yeah,
yeah, like a process for year one.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. So there's what I'm getting at is there are some things that were pointed out about this particular draft that we need to fix. But at the same time, there's all these other issues that come around because of our discussions related to this, which I think are important. And some of them we're gonna deal with and some of them we're gonna continue to stew on, you know, throughout the course of this year and next year or whatever. That's all related to our community and the need for more year-round housing and more population or whatever it is. But I think that the way that this committee, in my reflection, was that we try to approach this with a balanced perspective, which is to say, we recognize that there is a demand and need potentially for short-term rentals, and we recognize that there are negative community and neighborhood impacts to short-term rentals. Then the way we dove into this one was a very simple approach. We started with the safety aspect and not so much like, let's think about it from a zoning perspective. Now, there's ways that we can add some nuances to this based on the conversations that we're having, like calling something a short-term rental, which is kind of like what Tracy was describing, what Alan was describing, versus a vacation rental, which is a business. That may be a more complicated, longer process than what I think we're talking about with just this. So we might want to kind of tackle it in a couple of different ways. If we were gonna do this registration ordinance, what would we do just to make it
Simple.
as clean and as possible to review and take the comments from this perspective and then also work on the other stuff. But I'm just throwing out, I'm really trying to take it all in right now because it is such a complex and mostly emotional topic
Yes.
that we need to
Yes.
kind of sort through, you know, what I heard today from Tracy was an interesting perspective that we hadn't really had a chance to talk about last time around.
Which part of her?
Which is like,
perspective is-
we start, and I think Alan probably, you brought it up when we were going about it the first time around, but like thinking about them as two kind of separate
Yes,
things.
Oh, people that live here are renting their place, that, or,
If you're renting, it doesn't take away from some of the neighborhood impacts, which we can address in different ways, but. You know, that whole perspective
Mhm.
changes the equation a little bit.
And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That you can register and have short-term rental if it's your property.
Mhm.
Maybe that's how you get the registration,
When anybody who
If it's
buys
your
the
primary
property,
residence.
it's their
primary
property.
residence, yeah.
but that you're living in, that you're, where you're.
Well, then how do you
It's your
deal with
residence.
the summer residents who,
Yeah,
Like
not-
Ines brought up, yeah.
yes, I mean, that's a, that's
and how
a,
do you deal with, you know, I have two young men that live at the bottom of my street. Their mom passed away. They wanna keep the house. They grew up in this community. They're not here now, so they have to rent it until, I mean, they're in their forties. They can't retire yet.
Mhm.
They know they wanna be here.
that's a
So-
lot like this,
Mhm.
summer residents. who
But are they
claim they're
here-
gonna someday come
Between
here.
our.
I mean, it's the same.
Yeah,
kind of
but-
difference.
but these
They're trying to keep the house. and
They're
that's
trying
why
to
they're
keep
doing
their
it.
house. I
Right.
mean, it's a humble little house. It's
Right.
I
nothing.
know what you
Yeah.
mean, and I know the story.
Mhm.
But are those, can I just interject, like, are those people here at any point during the year? Like, they rent it out sometimes and then.
Yes, they are.
But
Yes,
they also grew up here.
They
They wanna
also
come
grew-
back to their childhood
Yes.
home, which I
Yeah.
don't think
Yes.
should be taken away from people. I
Right,
got the
Right.
same situation with my property on 3 properties, only
yeah,
1 house, but
yeah.
I'm saving it for my 4 children.
Mhm.
There's no
Yeah.
careers here for young
I
people.
know, that's it.
So I need to do something to take care of them so that in 30, 40 years, they've got a place to come back to, their home where they grew up. And.
Can I,
Mhm.
hi, can I say
Yeah.
something about that also online here? Donna Reese?
Go ahead, Donna.
Wouldn't that be the property you're talking about right now? Wouldn't that be the perfect thing to do a long-term rental so that they didn't have to have people moving in and out of their home for every 3 days? If someone's not here and they're trying to save their home, wouldn't that be the
And-
perfect thing to
I think
have?
the problem with a long-term year-round rental, and you can tell me this, you're not gonna make nearly as much money.
Right.
And I think, and this is an editorial, I don't know if I'm true or not, people that live in your home year-round are likely to be more abusive to the home and cost you more in repairs versus someone that's there just morning and night that
Well,
are on
as a
vacation.
year-round renter, I would have to disagree.
I would disagree with that as well.
Yeah, I would
Well,
disagree with
Well,
that also. I
that's
think,
respectful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
I
that's
think
their
that's the
home.
narrative there.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
Yeah.
that's,
thank
it.
you.
Mhm.
but what I can say is if you own a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch.
Mhm.
And it's your home that you grew up in. And your mom passes away and you wanna save your home. And it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch in a tight neighborhood. And you can rent it for $2,000 a week
Right, exactly,
or $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
right.
That's what you said.
And I think that's,
Yeah.
I think
That's
that's,
what-
their
yeah.
you're right
That's-
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a phenomenon that's happened in the last 15, 20 years.
Right.
20 years ago, this never happened.
Right.
It's the internet that's
Not
allowed all
Northeast
this.
Harbor, it's been going on.
Used to be an
Every
ad in the
single
back
houses,
of, you know, Down East Magazine,
Mhm.
rent
Yeah.
my house.
Well,
Yeah.
it's been easier to do it, but it's, my understanding, and I mean, again, my grandmother rented her
Yeah.
house out and lived in the basement.
Yeah, but my family did in Rock Island Road. but-
Yeah,
But it,
My parents have been, I mean, they opened the
Yeah.
office over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
but I think that's why. it's an
Mrs. Smallish did it before that.
emotional topic. It's, you can't argue that it's easier to do it now, though.
Yes,
Yes,
mhm.
Right, it's easier to monetize your property now than it
Mhm.
was before.
But how does that solve then? You have Gail's issue with, like, so we're still not really meeting.
so
in
do
the
you put in a,
well, those are
Is
two
there a
separate
minimum?
issues.
Separate, yes, yes.
is there a minimum? I mean, I have a girlfriend that lives in New York City and her building, they put in a minimum. You can't Airbnb for less than X
Well, that's
amount,
what I said, days, yeah,
X amount of nights.
yeah.
So, and I live in a tight neighborhood and one of the houses across the street from me has been a short-term rental. And every Saturday,
Yeah.
you know, we'd see them bailing out and bailing in.
Mm.
So I sympathize
Mhm.
with that.
We might want to consider breaking this into categories
Yeah,
under a heading of short-term rentals, because
Yep.
we're grappling right now with all kinds of suggestions to create a one-size-fits-all ordinance.
yeah,
And I think that's gonna be a messy nightmare.
yeah.
I think
I
that's.
think
what
we
we're-
need, like you had said, someone that owns a home and then, yes, it goes to a campground or goes to
Or
a
receives a
little
homeowner.
camp, they moved behind their house. Are they residents? Are they not?
So again, getting back to the
Yeah,
first thing I
there's a
said.
long way to go on this one.
Should there be
So
something called
long.
a short-term rental?
Yes,
versus a
yes, well, we
vacation
are
rental?
agreeing with you. We
There you
finally
go.
got there. We got there.
I think
Aye.
that's just, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yes, there are, but it's really, so the thing that I know about short-term rentals, which is.
More
not a
than you
lot,
wanted?
apparently,
Yeah, more
we're
than you
all
ever
learning about
wanted.
it, but is that you think there's a lot of tools you can bring to the table, but we need to create. A situation that's unique to the needs of this community. So again, like we can draw some examples from Bar Harbor or from Tremont or
Anywhere.
from anywhere in the world, in the country that's dealing with it, New York. But we need to tailor that to all the things that are unique to here. And that's what I think, when I started writing down this list and going back to my notes, that's what I think we should be trying to do.
I
But it is complicated when you try to do this is just a registration ordinance, but it doesn't deal with that, the land use implications
Right.
of that.
It doesn't deal
activity.
with policy. No.
Well, the policy choices are some things that the town really needs to decide on.
Yes.
How do you want to deal with this one thing? And I still would say it's an important part of the affordability issue on the island,
Mhm.
but it is not the only thing that we have to deal with.
Mhm.
It's one of many things.
And the National Association of Realtors has looked at this as well, and they're saying, in a nutshell, that some of these ordinances have big impacts on your ability to own property, property rights. So your rights to own property are being looked at with these short-term rentals.
Well, how can, I don't want to.
Because-
get into legal
yeah.
arguments, but if all we're doing is saying you can't do this activity. Depends on how.
But you have, the rights to own your property and the rights to do on your property what you wanna do, so.
But that's what ordinances do.
Right.
Residential
And that's
zoning
also-
has rules.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not true all across the board, that you have the right to do what you want on your property.
Right.
Obviously.
But. Again, I'm here to craft the will of the people.
But this is
And
a
my
nationwide
understanding-
concern.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
it's everywhere.
And I'm not sure how
Yeah.
special. they
International.
are.
Yeah,
Internet, yeah.
We're not, though, but it is. That's why I say it's a unique solution.
Never
Probably
mind.
a fairly common problem to a unique solution. We need a unique solution to this common problem, because the things that I wrote almost a very similar ordinance for the town of Tremont, and so far have had very little comment. I know we're gonna get to it, I'm pretty sure, but it was a wholly different experience in Tremont.
Why was it different? Like, what do you mean? Why would it be different? Just,
I can't tell you why it was different.
and you
I
already
don't
have
know.
a
I
week,
didn't- I
right?
literally
You
don't
have
know.
a week, or Tremont has a week minimum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're technically, yes.
Yeah.
Right, and again, I have a vacation, or I would call it a vacation rental in these terms. I get it,
Mhm.
but I think it's a big issue on the island and it needs solutions to be addressed. And they're not one size fits all.
No.
But I like the idea, I do, as a planner, I like the idea of getting the data. And saying, oh, here's all these clusters of short-term rentals, and how does that affect the neighborhood that did we want that to be a year-round neighborhood versus something that's now not a year-round neighborhood, but how do we deal with, the people like Innes or Tracy or the guys that you were just talking about? It's just a really interesting challenge.
It's gonna be interesting, yeah.
Anyway,
Anytime you have
Mhm.
regulation of any kind in there, it's gonna be a problem.
Mhm,
If you're just trying to get a census of what's going on,
mhm.
that's a completely different thing, and it may be impossible to get. But if any of this that we have put in so far is considered an invasion of privacy.
Right.
And then we're always gonna get that every time we do this, if that's,
Mhm.
and I think it's gonna come that we have to do that anyways. But just data collection shouldn't be suffering because we can't get to the point of everything being agreeable.
yeah, but
Mhm.
we'll try to get some data, it won't be accurate data, but we can get it, as I said before, I'm not hiding the fact that you can get data from their DNA, but it isn't 100%. It
Yeah.
doesn't give you the full picture.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Hmm.
I think it's 6:30. I just wanted to end on a couple of notes, I think there's some other housing type initiatives we might wanna consider, was it Alan, did you bring in that one from Bar Harbor last time, or did somebody hand it, can you shared accommodations and employee living quarters?
Oh, that would be
We
good.
might
Put
wanna
that a lot.
consider.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Workforce housing.
Well, workers housing, workers housing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
So we need to
it's-
think
yeah,
about
that would be-
zones.
Yeah.
And doing that. From now on, I'm gonna continue to bring the handy comprehensive plan and
Mhm.
our lovely growth area map, which again is a very important thing to refresh all of our memories on. These little areas in red.
Mhm.
If we can have some of this stuff, printed out stuff, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Village.
well, we have the
Mhm.
comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I have that probably right here. It's inside my big thing.
Yeah, I can print out some other copies of this, Alan. But the growth area map is really interesting because it helps us think about areas of the town that the town already decided were supposed to be.
Big
dense
growth areas, yeah.
development.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what a
interesting,
growth area is.
right,
Where should
but it's already
growth be?
been, who decided this? Just curious.
Bunch of people in the.
The
dark
residents of the
region.
town. of
Yeah, I was gonna say, this
There's a cold and dark one of
was that,
The people with the magic
I'm
markers.
curious, yeah, no, it's why they, I don't know, I just,
2000, whatever, 9,
so they think these places should grow,
those are already the growth. areas. Those are
right,
probably
that's what I-
areas
yeah.
already served by water and sewer
okay,
and for sewer.
interesting.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's kind of good to know, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, there's one fact that I hate to admit,
Hmm.
but we are
Still have
a,
that.
a destination,
Yes,
vacation destination
we are,
area.
And we're always gonna be.
and we're always gonna be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless somebody can buy the park.
Well, don't tempt anyone, yeah,
Private park would. be
Everything is for sale.
yeah, God.
Everything has its price. I don't disagree with that.
I'm sorry, what is
Registration ordinance.
license?
If Rockefeller can move her navel,
It's down along Desert Shore.
that's whatever he did.
Yeah, but-
Like,
It's not just licensing.
I'm not around.
Interesting.
But, you know,
No,
all,
regulations,
every
they have to be
tourist town in the
certain
world.
words.
All right,
I know.
Imagine what it must.
let's get back to that, Kip. So just to end the meeting, I also want to say, so we had applied, on behalf of the town of Mount Desert and Tremont and Locust Harbor and Bar Harbor, we had applied for a housing opportunities grant.
Mhm.
And that's building on it. Nobody went to the house. I don't know if anybody here went to the housing summit except him. You were there,
It
right?
looks like Kathy.
So, and
I
Kathy
was
you were
there.
there. So we actually were awarded, and Katrina was there. Right, we were actually awarded the grant to continue that work.
Oh, nice.
Oh, good,
So we're gonna be doing that.
okay, that's
Yeah.
lovely.
So LD 2003 work can actually be funded to a whole separate and just for select people on
So
that.
that's because us three participated.
Yeah.
We got to go.
Good, oh, that's great. How much, did they say how much, or is it a percent?
Did they say it was just because you went or?
Yeah, yeah.
So, no, we,
Did they mention anybody by name?
no, we wrote.
Kim,
we as
it
in
was the
Muscle
case,
Group
Kim,
wrote a
Kathy, and
grant,
Katrina.
Yeah.
For work to continue but many of the initiatives that came out of the 2003 housing summit that we had. And some of that work is gonna entail, creating more community conversations about different kinds of housing. I'll bring the
Mhm.
work plan next time. But it's
Do we
good.
have a spot in Mount Desert that has like for workers housing? I'm
No,
not saying work for, but like a dormitory type, we don't have anything like
Not really.
that.
We
No.
have roaming in housing.
only
With
here.
room.
Only in-
Yeah.
Only on Main Street,
Only
That's
on-
only in village commercial.
Yeah.
only on, oh,
Island Housing Trust has, you
Mhm.
know, affordable
yeah.
housing. and
Well, I
stuff
was
like that.
thinking like,
They're thinking more like
Like the
seasonal
dorm
work.
yeah, like the dorm for Jordan Pond House or in Bar Harbor at the end of Eden Street there that
A
they're
lot
doing,
of
yeah.
that's the responsibility of the employers.
Well,
My last
right,
house
yes,
was
yes.
bought by a person who has 2
Right.
restaurants in Bar
Yeah.
Harbor.
So Alan,
Yeah.
the difference is, there's no land use category.
right, you can't go
that would
build
Say,
one.
hey, I wanna go, I'm an employer, I need housing, I wanna
Right.
go build this type of structure
Mhm.
in the village residential district.
There's only one zone.
And we could do it
Right.
here, but we call it a boarding house,
And
right?
there's no more land
But-
here, or no more room.
Village residential 3 allows staff housing on site.
Oh,
which
yeah.
we asked to do.
The
Right.
only-
Oh, the
There's
Aztec,
one other
yeah.
zone, that's
They could buy property that's zoned for a hotel and build their own hotel and keep their employees in a
Well,
hotel.
there's only a couple areas.
Oh,
in-
right. that too.
Zones that allow-
Yeah.
So, what
Hmm.
one of the conversations has been with some of these larger, more seasonal employers is where we've been taking all these houses off the market because
Yes.
we need to fill that need.
Mhm.
In a lot of the towns on NDI, there is no provision to allow them to do, it's not necessarily a dorm, but it's something like a dorm. And I think we should be looking at that and where is the appropriate. are there
Agree, yeah.
Locations for that?
Glamping?
Employee Glenn?
Well, I think it was Walsh, right, that who's not to bring up a big hotel, whatever, but I think they have committed to not buying any more, even though they probably own a ton, any more houses and starting to build, like, they're the ones building that dormitory.
With them.
With them, okay, at the end of the, so,
And even the park is for,
And the
Yes,
park's
yeah.
doing it.
even the park.
and the
is-
park is, so
Yeah,
it is.
Friends of
And a
Acadia
friend of
buying them.
Acadia, but there's nowhere in the town of Mount Desert to do that as of yet, well, except where there's no land on Main Street.
Yeah,
Okay,
you know, like, and, Camp Beach Cliff is asked.
Oh, Camp Beach Cliff has.
Housing
Yeah.
on there, but.
and you can't, yeah,
Dormitory.
oh,
Not yet.
really?
No.
Huh,
And they have a
Working
junior.
on all those
yeah, I was
guys.
gonna say they're playing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
COA too, up at the farm, they've asked also to get
Really?
dormitories for their employees for the season.
I figured you could already do that, okay, well, good to know.
Anyway,
We should allow hobbit houses.
Something, yeah, some, or, yeah, I mean,
I don't think there's any standard.
well, I know one restaurant that owns a ton of houses in Bar Harbor
But then,
for their
Yeah.
housing,
Sounds like. it.
so.
Anyway, that's what
I
we
think
are.
we're done.
Thank
I
you.
would
Thank you.
entertain a move to adjourn.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Second,
There you go. That's hard to be forced.
Sorry.
Especially the
Sorry.
What?
And I didn't mean to freak out on Tracy, I was just kind of like. I just don't think we're gonna get
Jerry, are you
anywhere.
gonna call me soon for a date?